Have you ever been in a conversation and landed in the place that was twiddling your thumbs, or you got to kind of a natural end, and there were some crickets, and then maybe followed by a so ... Cool, you're like everybody else on the planet. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how to never run out of things to say. I'm Chad Littlefield, let's go. I'm Chad Littlefield, let's get into it. Much better. I'd love for you to stick around for the whole video because I'm gonna unpack 3 ideas that together create a nice little bow on this topic. And the first one is going to be a perspective shift that takes all of the pressure off of having things or the perfect or the right thing to say in a conversation. The second is about just a sequence of failures that I experienced that taught me a really, really important lesson. And then the third one I call the road trip method. It's a really nifty idea and metaphor, and I think you'll love it too. So for this first one, the paradigm shift, I'm gonna save you 59 minutes. I'm gonna skip to the end of one of my more popular keynotes focused around asking powerful questions and creating conversations that matter. I'm often invited to give this to leaders who have been promoted into a position of leadership, whether that's in an educational, higher ed context, or in a business context. So as an individual contributor, they may have been really good at having all the answers, but when the further you move up, the less answers you have, and the more questions you might need to ask. And so oftentimes, not always, I like to mix up every keynote and tailor it to an audience, but oftentimes I will end with a sentence like this. What would happen if you stopped speaking in periods and started speaking in question marks? That punctuation, that idea, maybe not as heavy hitting without the first 59 minutes, but you get the idea, right? If you speak in sentences that all end in periods, you're gonna run out of things to say, or you're gonna start traveling to the land of BS where you're making stuff up as a leader. Whereas if you learn to speak and start meetings in sentences that end in question marks, you'll never run out of things to say because there's always something to be curious about. There's always something that can be unpacked, and it will allow you to activate the collective knowledge of the person you're talking to or the group that you're working with. Really simple way to practice this is, as a leader and educator, consider starting off any gathering, class, meeting with a question instead of a sentence that ends in a period. The second way to think about practicing that is when somebody shares something with you, it is human nature, adult human nature, to respond in a sentence that ends in a period, to respond with a statement of, oh, I really loved hearing that, or oh, that's really amazing, or cool, or whatever else. What would it look like if you took that in, you held it for a second or two, you paid attention to what am I curious about, and you fired back with a question. It would fundamentally change the conversation, and you wouldn't run out of things to say, but you also wouldn't be saying that many words. Questions are a really great way to win in the economy of words. If you were taxed for every single word you said, I would make sure a lot of my words were questions. Now, to be clear, a conversation without self-disclosure is an interrogation. And so I'm not saying about just only asking questions. I'm just acknowledging that on average, adults ask 6 to 12 questions per day. What if we move that up to like 8? Or 12 on a good day of questions, right? What if we were just a little bit more intentional about asking a pinch more? You wouldn't run out of things to say. The second idea is just actually 2 words. And I learned these words the hard way when I joined in improv class in college and was in this group, and it was one of the most brain-stretching things. I thought that I could kind of think on my feet and share. And then I joined this improv class and I was like, right? There are so many times where my face and cheeks got red because it got to me and I didn't know what to do, what to say in that particular moment until somebody offered me the words yes and a lot of leaders and educators are familiar with this now, which makes me happy. I want to offer you a nuanced take on it. So the idea of yes and is when you're in a scene with somebody and you're improvising that scene, which is what a conversation is, it's what a meeting is, it's what most learning and education is to some degree, right? No matter how much you plan out, there's a pretty large margin of improvisation in any of those contexts. And so the idea of yes and is no matter what happens, no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody does, your response is yes, and then you go to build on that. And when you do that, it creates this stacking effect that builds upon what somebody else has done. Rather than detracting, rather than chasing down some other random rabbit hole, it builds. And so if everybody's doing that in a conversation too, it's a really fun conversation because it starts to get really creative, interesting, etc., which is why we watch improv, which is why we enjoy and laugh at improv. Now the practical angle is literally respond. Like if you run out of things to say, to whatever the person has just said or asked, just respond with yes, and those two words will get you started on building upon whatever's happening. The nuanced wisdom in there, though, is the mindset around yes and. It's walking through the world thinking about how could I add to, construct, build, make this conversation better, make this person better, etc. And when you walk through the world with a mindset of yes and, a mindset of a conversational construction worker, really amazing, brilliant things can happen. I did get better at improv. However, I learned my weakness. Whenever anybody would make any reference to anything pop culture, a song, they'd like start singing a song and then gesture to me to sing it. And I would be like, yes, and I would not know it. I'm like just totally clueless with that kind of stuff. And so knowing that this is, again, not a silver bullet, right? It's just a really helpful meme, idea, or tool to carry around in your back pocket so that you can say things deliberately rather than just filling the world with fluff. Right? Keep fluff on sandwiches with peanut butter, not in conversations with humans. Road trip method. Okay, check this out. This is a little epiphany that I had when I was driving somewhere with my brother. And I did a full video on this somewhere, so if you Google Chad road trip method, it should come up. But the idea was, I was realizing as we were driving in my brother's lovely little lime green Kia Soul, realizing that I was in the passenger seat and there was a Marriott sign that looked like it had been scraped off. And this was in the middle of COVID, and I thought I had read an article that the Marriott was closing down or something. Wasn't, that's not a thing, but it started a conversation, right? And then we drove by an IKEA, and we started talking about the sustainability of IKEA. And my aha there in the road trip method is realizing on a road trip, unlike a conversation where you're sitting in a room with somebody, you're moving at 60, 70 miles an hour through the world, and all of this stimuli is flying at you. And so yes, I agree that in a conference room or classroom, there's not quite as much stimuli flying by you at 70 miles per hour. But I would also say that 90% of the things that we could potentially notice in an environment go undiscussed, unmentioned, untalked about. And so the road trip method is to open your eyes and really tune in to what's around you. A few years back, I went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat in the middle of nowhere, Canada in the winter. I don't know how well you know me, but that was hard. And one of my learnings from that retreat was when you quiet your mind down, your senses open up, right? All of a sudden I was much more tuned in to the bird sounds around me, much more tuned into all the nuances and details in the world around me. And so sometimes in order to activate the road trip method in a mundane environment, you've got to take 60 seconds of quiet and calm to just notice what's around you and let that serve as fuel or gasoline for conversation, whether you ask a question about it, practice the first two methods using this idea of the road trip method. This was fun, and I do it every week. I send out weekly videos to a list of really brilliant leaders and educators, and if you want to be on that list, get some free resources, there's a link in the description. I'm Chad. Have an awesome day.